the echoes of what happened are still with us today,
Yeah.
very
Well,
strongly.
yeah.
And I think that that's what this book, in my estimation, what I tried to do was to carry the story up to today.
Yeah. Welcome back to Alabama Politics This Week. David Person, Josh Moon, and I am especially pleased to have my good friend, former colleague from the Huntsville Times, when way back in the day with the Huntsville Times, Mike Marshall, one of the more prolific, stellar writers. He wasn't just a reporter, but he was a great writer at the
Well, thank
Huntsville
you.
Times. Mike, good to have you on with us.
Always great to see you.
Yes, sir. Same here, man. And I wanted to have Mike on because Mike has authored a book that I believe has added to the reckoning that Alabama needs to have with its civil rights history. Its bloody, very brutal civil rights history. Mike's book is called No Place for Pilgrims, and it is a book that Mike believes has solved the murder of civil rights protester William Moore, a white man who came from the North to protest in the South and was killed in Alabama brutally. Mike, I want you to tell us a little bit, just give us a brief summary of the William Moore story.
William Moore was a 35-year-old postman from Binghamton, New York, lifelong pacifist. He had spent his childhood, his formative years in Mississippi, and had developed a great attachment to the Deep South. He had moved back at 9 years old to Binghamton, New York, and he was a drifter and a dreamer. I think that's the best way to put William, is that he very much was an idealist, very much identified with the underdog, the oppressed. That's who he gravitated to, in part because he had lived a life where he felt he was the underdog, and in his own way was oppressed. He was viewed with scorn in Binghamton for his idealistic views. But he had managed to cobble together a life, a respectable life. Very, very smart man. Married, 3 stepchildren, and but his mission was to make a difference in the world. And he at first viewed world peace as his track to changing the world. But as he became, as events in the early 60s, he identified strongly with civil rights. The burning of the Freedom Riders bus in Anniston was the catalyst. And there was a man who was beaten brutally at the Birmingham bus station. His name was James Peck. And William Moore invited James Peck to Binghamton to speak, and that was a transformational event for him. He heard Peck, heard him talk about what he experienced in Birmingham, and the beatings, and from that moment on, he devoted his life to civil rights. And so he decided, he moved to Washington, D.C., or Baltimore, and decided that what he would do would be he would walk from Chattanooga to Jackson, Mississippi, and he had 2 sandwich board signs on him. One on the back said "Equal Rights for All, Mississippi or Bust," and he was going to walk down Highway 11. The highway at that time was the main highway from Chattanooga to Jackson, Mississippi, through Birmingham and Tuscaloosa, and along the way he was going to try to to change the racial divide, because he felt like as a Southerner or someone who identified with the South, that he would have sway with Southerners to help change attitudes.
Yeah. So he comes down here, as you said, on his way to Mississippi to hand deliver a letter to the governor. He gets to the Gadsden area, and that's where he is brutally killed. Now, you learned about his murder as a child. This is some years later. The early 70s, I guess, you
Mid
learned about
70s,
this? Mid 70s?
it was
Okay.
76. It was the spring of 76. I was researching a term paper,
Right.
and because that was the year of the bicentennial, I did a term paper on civil rights, and as I was researching the term paper, I found this article in Time magazine on Moore, and after I read it, I said, well, when I get old enough to handle such matters, I'm gonna solve the murder and write a book about it. And the
Right.
reason being because I had spent such a long period of time in that area as a child, and that's what got my attention.
Yeah. So roughly 13 years after the murder, you make this discovery, and now we are, um, um, right about 50 years later.
Right.
If my math is right, you've got this book published where you believe you have solved the murder. Who do you believe killed William Moore?
I was told by numerous people that the way that the murder happened was, well, there's a long story about what people believe happened. He
Yeah, do we
comes
want to
into
give away the
Alabama.
book? I mean, do we want to give away the hook in the book? I mean, it's I mean, yeah,
Well,
we want to give away the hook,
Well, you
right?
know, we can let people wait and read the book to see, but I think the real juicy part, Josh, is the discovery how Mike gets to that point. Because by the time Mike conclusively solves this, if I'm not mistaken, the murderer has already passed on, right?
The man who I was told. Now, the man who many people told me was responsible for this. This man was never named. He was never named in any of the news reports. He is only mentioned in passing in some of the investigative files that were leaked to me. He does not appear. This man does not appear best I can tell, in the initial. And I filed the Freedom of Information Act and received hundreds of pages on on this case. I can't tell that in those documents that he's named in this man who I was told. Now he was named. There was the Emmett Till Act, where the FBI resurrected old cold civil rights cases. Now he is named in that in passing. His name is redacted, but I can tell that that's who that name is. Who he's.
Well, now
But he's only named in passing.
let me
So
just ask you a quick question on that, Mike, before Josh jumps in with his questions. Are you saying that he was implicated in the Emmett Till murder as well?
he was on. No, he was only named. He was only cited. He was not implicated.
Okay.
No. In fact, let's be clear that when the FBI resurrected the case, around 2010, 11, 12, that they concluded that the findings were that the man who was charged and released was they concluded he was the likely killer. But he was not. He was not the killer. In fact, in fact, if you dig into newspaper records, you'll find that he was, and in fact, I was told by people who were that I interviewed who had firsthand knowledge of the case, that he was at his store at that night of the murder. He was 20 miles from the murder scene. And when the Alabama authorities came to arrest him, there was a large crowd outside his store, and everybody in the community is aghast that they're arresting this man because, hey, we all saw him at the store. He wasn't there. He wasn't down there. And in fact, there's a great piece of reporting by a legendary journalism figure named Murray Kempton, who wrote an article about this for the New Republic. He was there. He witnessed when they arrested him, and then this man's wife runs out in the highway and says, "It can't be my husband. He had nothing to do with it." Well, he didn't. He didn't have any. I mean, he wasn't there. He wasn't the killer. Now, it was his car. They used his car, and that was his gun. But he was not the killer.
So let's go back just a little bit, and let's do some timeline for you personally on this thing. So yeah, I know 76. You start with the term paper. And you decide that in the future you're going to write this, you're going to dig into this thing, you're going to try to solve it. I mean, which I think all of us who've done some investigative reporting, there's been one or two or three, or maybe even more, little things that come along from time to time that we think, one day I'm going to go back and I'm going to figure this shit out. We're going to come back and we're going to figure this out. But it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to actually do it. So when did you actually get started after 76? When did you actually get, I mean, I know, I know people often will like do pieces here or there, but when did you really start to dig in?
When I decided that I was absolutely 100% going to commit myself to this was in March of 2000. I had been up on Sand Mountain. I was probably sitting back near the Huntsville Times editorial area with Dave at that time. I was up on Sand Mountain, and I was talking to a gentleman. His name was Herman Curley, and he was extremely important to me in this in my reporting of all this. But I was reporting. I was at Sand Mountain. I was in Rainsville, and he was the only African American leader in DeKalb County at that time, and I remember it vividly. We were talking, and he was telling me about how, in his words, the Klan used to chase him all over the mountain. He was the principal at Gregory, which was that was the African American school during segregation.
Right.
And he had actually seen William Moore, but we never talked about William Moore that day. We were talking about something else. It was a story about life for African Americans on Sand Mountain. And he said, he told me.
But that's a hell of a story in and of itself, knowing a little bit about Sand Mountain. Yeah. Yeah.
And he told me, he said at that time, he said, and he was telling me about what he had, some of the things he experienced. And he said, well, the Hispanics now are where we used to be. He said, the social order on Sand Mountain has changed. And he told me, he said, it's all changed. Then we talked about that, and I said, well, if I'm ever going to do this, now is the time to do it. So I drove down the the eastern side of the mountain, drove down Highway 11, drove through the community, all the communities that were central to this case, went to Gadsden, went to the public library, started digging around, went through the city directories to find out. I knew the chief investigator was still living. So I went and I got his address, called him that night, and his name was Roy McDowell. And but I knew he was still living, and I said, I'm interested in this case. Do you remember the case? Oh yeah, I know plenty about it. Main thing I was interested in, do you still have the files? Oh yes, I still have the files. I kept all my files. Great. So I drive down the next day to where he lived. He lived in the same community that my paternal grandparents lived, so I knew exactly, how to get there and all. I can still see it. He had a he had a home near the river, had sliding glass doors. He's sitting on the couch. He motions me to come in. We sit down. First thing the main thing I'm interested in is, do you have the file? No, I don't have that file. Damn it, I kept all my files, but I didn't have that one. So immediately I'm thinking, oh, here we go. But the interview was very, very productive, believe it or not. He remembered everything in great detail, to the point that he said, I can still see the man's face with the dome of my car hitting his face. Mm-hmm. He said it was dusk. He said, I can still see his face clearly. But here's the kicker. He told me, he said, I always believed and figured I'd be right, that the man who killed him was watching us as we talked. Hmm. Now he knew, from that exchange, draw your own conclusions.
Yeah. So when in this process, it's because again, it's one thing to say you're going to do it. It's another thing to actually do it. When in this process do you think, I'm either you think I'm going to figure it out, or did somebody just drop it on you one day?
Well, that's
how
a very
did you figure out how this was? Yeah.
There's I interviewed McDowell. Mm-hmm. I interviewed one of the men who found the body. Okay. Then I interviewed the coroner. After I interviewed the coroner, I was like, there's something seriously messed up here. I knew that this was absolutely 100% not as it had appeared. Well, about 3 years in, I met the man who's probably the most influential person in helping me see the way on this. And his name was Kenneth Hammond, who was a former Alabama state senator, and he was Alabama Public Service Commissioner, but he was also the number one antagonist of George Wallace. So that got him exiled to the village of Valley Head, Alabama, which is right there in the corner of, I don't know if you know where Valley Head is, but it's right there in the corner, right there at the base of Lookout Mountain.
Right, yes.
And right there in the corner of Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee. And he liked to, Dave, I did a few stories on Kenneth Hammond for the Huntsville Times, and there was a reason for that. And I used to go over to his office, and he had a lot of time on his hands, and he liked to talk.
Yeah.
And I would sit in his council chamber, and he would filibuster me and give me all sorts of lessons about Alabama politics. And then we would get down to the discussion of talking about this case. And he, one day, very early on, He liked to talk to me about how much he knew about the area, and he would take he was a brilliant politician in my estimation, and he would take each of the beat boxes in that area in that DeKalb County, and he would go down each of the beat boxes, and he would tell me who all the families were in these boxes, and how he would mine the votes out of these beat boxes. And then he got to beat 3 box 1, and he starts telling me about all of the families in and the communities in that box. And I said, "Oh yeah, I'm very familiar." I said, "Is that the Dogtown Cauldron box?" And he said, "Oh yeah, that is." He said, "Well, I see you know a lot about this area." Well, that's my maternal grandparents are from that area, and I have numerous relatives in there. And so I told him, I said, "Yo, I'm related to so and so." Now, Bozo Hammond fashioned himself as a poker player of the first degree, all night card games and so on and so forth. But when I told him who I was related to, that poker face was gone.
Okay.
And it was like I had stabbed him right in the gut. And I looked at him and I said,
Hey, Mike, let me before we run out of time here, let me just ask you this. What do you think people need to understand most about what William Moore was trying to do, and why his murder and the solving of his murder is so important?
Well, what he was trying to do was he was tremendously idealistic. His whole mantra, his whole purpose in life was, let's talk out our differences. That's what he believed strongly.
Right.
Everything he did was, let's talk out our differences. So we disagree. So what? Let's talk about it, and let's see if we can come to bridge the divide. He believed, in my estimation, I mean, he believed in the holy goodness of people, and he felt like that we could talk our differences out and come to a like-mindedness. He believed in the best of America, and he felt like that let's get on the same page. So that's what he was trying to accomplish.
Right. So you got a white guy who comes from upstate New York to the South, even though he had Southern roots. He is followed. Law enforcement is aware of him. The FBI is aware of him. He gets killed. What do you think it was about his presence that made him such a target? What was it that stirred up and agitated, things to such a degree that caused him to be murdered?
I think there were now foremost, I think that at the time of spring of 1963, Northern white activists were even more hated. They were the most hated of all because they were viewed as traitors to their race. And so William Moore, a white man, now William Moore, if you go what I found was this man was so unique, and as soon as he moved to Baltimore, he left his family in Binghamton. He moved to Baltimore. He goes and helps protest with Morgan State College students the integration of a theater.
Right.
And he is the only white man who's arrested. He also goes to the Corps office, spends his time there, and there's a great there's a great column by a Baltimore Afro-American columnist named Ralph Matthews after Moore's death, and they talk about how Moore would spend all his time at the Corps office sending out, he would send out all sorts of Corps notices, stuff in envelopes, licking envelopes, spending all his time, and as everyone is talking about what's going on in America at that time, he would just sit there and be very quiet, listen, and never said anything, and he was the only white man in there, and so he puzzled everyone there. So how can this white man sit and just listen to all this, the talk, which would get fairly emotional, but yet he was very calm, but that's who he identified.
Yeah.
That's who he identified with. That's what. And so to answer your question though, and I think what I guess the question that why should we care about this man and his death? Well, the echoes of what happened are still with us today, very strongly.
Yeah,
and I think that that's what this book, in my estimation, what I tried to do was to carry the story up to today.
Yeah.
And so there are so many things that we are living with today that resonate in the book. The George Floyd case was something that was, I mentioned in the book, and there is a passage from. I don't know if you gentlemen are familiar with a legendary journalism figure by the name of Bill Kovich. He was a former editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and he was the Washington bureau chief for the New York Times. And he reported on this event for the Nashville Tennessean. He was a cub reporter for the Nashville Tennessean, and he had just come from Montgomery, where Bobby Kennedy was meeting with George Wallace over the integration of the University of Alabama. Wallace, by the way, who happened to put up the Confederate flag on the Alabama dome for Bobby Kennedy's arrival.
Yeah.
That's how it started.
Yeah.
And so Kovich comes back up and he stops in Gadsden, and he reports for 3 days on this incident. And in the course of his reporting, there is a passage. Well, there's two passages which I found highly illuminating. One was the Klan leader in Gadsden. He is right there in there with the authorities, state and local authorities, in the examination of the gun before it's sent to the FBI laboratory in Washington.
Yeah. And
Now,
Josh,
this is the same pattern that the state of Alabama followed in the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. Investigation.
And that's what I was, and Mike, that's what I was going to say to Josh. I think as we wrap this up, this is an excellent point that you make in your book, that there is an overt collusion between the Ku Klux Klan and law enforcement. And it's something that has defined law enforcement in the South for decades. Josh, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm sorry, Mike. We got to cut it off because we got some other folks that are waiting to come on. But listen, man, the book is No Place for Pilgrims. I encourage people. This is a fascinating story, and we could sit here and talk about it for hours.
Oh, we've only scratched the surface. There's a personal
we'll get some folks to buy
here.
Yeah, we'll get some folks to buy the book and read it and man, because I mean, honestly, that's one of the best things that can happen here. You get a little money and people get educated in what's happening, and we get it out there.
I think the story, to answer Dave's question, is I think there's tremendous relevance to today.
Yeah,
and I always think that's the challenge of history.
I think you're absolutely right. But Mike, man, thank you for joining us. Thank you for writing this and for what you've done here. And we'll send everybody we can to buy this thing, man. We
Thanks
really
so
do
much.
appreciate you.
I appreciate the
Thank you, Mike.
time.
Take it easy,
Thank
Mike.
you. Take care. Thank you much.
All right,
brother.
we're going to slide out of here. We'll be right back. It's Alabama Politics This Week. We're back in a moment.